mean, honestly, to get us started, I already feel pretty close to the action at Torbay. Emma, you and I have worked
Hmm.
closely together for quite a long time. We've done a lot of work together. But in terms of scene setting for everybody else, I just wondered if it'd be really good to give people a sense, looking through your lens as CEO at Torbay, uh, of the scale of the transformation that you're currently leading. Just talk to us about what's going on.
Okay. Well, I guess the scale is significant. And if I just sort of give you a bit of background in terms of why I'm saying that, is that Torbay Pharmaceuticals, we're 50 years old and we manufacture injectables for the pharmaceutical industry. And we're in a facility in Paynton. So for 49 and a half of those 50 years, the business has been in NHS ownership. We have, as a business, built positive and strong reputation in the UK. But I guess, why is the scale significant? It is because we've come from an NHS heritage. We have positives around that, but the NHS is all about running hospitals. It is about treating patients. We're a business. We're here to make money. So we have had to move the dial quite significantly. And we started in 2017, where a new management team came in, including myself. And that was about resetting the strategy and turning ourselves into a global manufacturer. So we've done quite well, as Nath sort of alluded to earlier. We're in multiple countries. We're in 20 countries worldwide, and we're about to go through FDA approval. So we've come a long way. And it's been quite significant to get to what I would say in my head is about the halfway point of our transformation. We've done a lot of work in terms of developing our people, giving people confidence to do things differently and to change and to grow. And being a contract manufacturer, obviously, you have to provide a fantastic first-class service. So that means as an organisation, we've had to behave and act and think differently. And the balance for us has been about doing that, but also keeping the best bits of our NHS heritage, because there's some positives around that. But we've also had to redesign our processes. People have had to develop new skills. We've increased our use of technology. The list goes on. And as part of our long-term strategy, we were always going to sell the business out of NHS ownership. And we were sold in last year, 23, in November, to private equity, to a company called North Edge. That gives us security, gives us capital investment, freedom to act and to really execute on our strategy. So when you put all of that into the mix and think about that, that's absolutely huge. And I keep thinking about what it must feel like for our colleagues in TP, because the pace of change, it is constant and it is absolutely relentless for people in the business. And that can be energizing for some people from a game changer perspective, or it can actually be quite challenging and quite difficult depending on where you fit in the game changer. So it's been massive, and we're only halfway through.
It's that old Mother Teresa quote, isn't it? In a sense of like, I can do things you cannot, you can do things I cannot. Together we do great things, and it's there sort of, even if someone's new to the G scene, it's staring you there in 5 numbers behind. And I love that about managing energies. One organization said they were going through a transformation much like yours, and they said our workload is relentless. We can't stop any more of the workload, and but what we can do with this language and data is manage the energy of our people as they go through that workload, making sure they're doing things that give more energy than takes energy away.
And when you're coaching as well, I've had people come into my office going, "Oh, I'm struggling today," and we'll talk about saying, "Well, is that because you're not an implementer and you're finding that a challenge?" So we can use that language in a positive way and actually say, well, why don't you go and buddy up with so and so, because actually they can probably support and help you make sense of it. Go and talk to the strategists or whatever. And that, I think, is really helpful, because I think it creates a language. It's like any of these things, but it creates a language, and then it helps to create positive relationships and a purpose in terms of making the business successful. And we use it, we have a laugh with it as well. I mean, that's the other thing, if we're in meetings, it helps call things out. So I can, say, "Oh, you know, do you mind not being too polishy, because we're not at that point, but doing it in the right way.
Yeah,
So it really helps you do that. And now actually, you know, my teams, they used to say, oh, you're a bit whirlwindy. So now they just go, can you stop being a game changer, because we don't need that.
I think that's brilliant, because our only framework historically for those conversations has been personality, and people take them personally. Whereas if you can depersonalize those conversations, you know, it's that's where the G6 really sort of, you know, comes in to sort of depersonalize. It's not Nathan, stop being a picky, you know, a picky bugger that's always criticizing something. It's like, Nathan, we don't need you to polish this. Okay, fair enough. That's easier.
Yeah, it does make it safer. You know, it feels like a safe sort of way of feeding back. And for me, it gives you the language that helps to explain why things have been as they have before. A little bit like Emma was saying about being a game changer and not realizing that she was earlier on in her career. And Emma just saying now about how we used to ping off each other in high level conversations. All we knew is it worked. And we didn't really know, but now we've got a language to explain why it did. So you can replicate that, right? You can, you know, you can find it in other people.
And we've done that from a customer perspective, because my colleague that is also a game changer. So we did this actually this week. We met with a client and they wanted to talk about new stuff. No idea how we're going to implement it, but it was just us two, because of course that doesn't bother me, bothers everybody else. And then we have our colleague that actually is a strategist. So we bring him in. So the next meeting, he will be involved, because he's then joining the dots, and he's also quite a high implementer. So we actually are using it to actually add value and help shorten our customer kind of engagement process, because we've got the right people in the meetings as the negotiations develop.
You're using it to make an impact, Emma.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it works.
Can you give us an idea of where you think you've seen the most value? Because you've used it in a number of different ways now, right?
Yeah, we have. I would say probably recruitment is where we're using it sort of quite heavily at the moment. And just reflecting on, we've just recruited a new CPO, and you know, how many times when you do interviews in the sort of post wrap up, you start going, wow, would that candidate get on well with X and Y? You know, so therefore they might be a good fit to the team. So we look at that obviously, but we've also broadened that out and taken a different perspective and said, where is that person going to add value to the team that they're joining, and not and the organization. And in this particular example, that as an executive team, we're pretty light in terms of playmaker, and we know that there is a gap. This person that we've employed, that started with us on Monday actually, she's actually a 10. So in terms of her natural kind of bias, that's what she loves doing. So that is just absolutely brilliant, because it feels like that our team is now becoming more complete.
And as well as kind of showing you that, did it drive you in any way in regards of the panel where the questioning went? Did it influence how you were able to take the process forward?
Yes it did, because of course you all kind of, you know, see different things in an interview, but when you produce the report and we then looked at it again, it made sense to everybody, first of all, of how the individual was answering the questions and where they were coming from, but also made sense in terms of how does this work from a team and business perspective of what we want to do going forward. So it really helped. And I was also then thinking about the time where it stopped me making a wrong recruitment decision.
Okay, tell us more.
So we were recruiting for an operational role, and the person that at that moment in time who was probably the preferred candidate, you did the profiling, and they were a game changer. Now, nothing wrong with that, because I'm one of those. However, we actually needed someone in that role who was really process driven, detailed, strong implementer. So yes, that individual probably could have done the role, but actually in terms of what we needed right there and then, in terms of those skills and that approach, was different.
Why do you think resilience is really important in business, and do you think the GC index can help with that?
Yes, I think it is incredibly important, because any business, not just Torbay Pharmaceuticals, you know, to be successful in this day and age, you have to constantly be going through change and developing. You know, there's so much coming at us. And so I think that using the GC index helps you drive that change. But what it's doing is it's playing to people's strengths. So you're putting people in the right place at the right time to deliver what you need to deliver. You know, and if you go back to the example of if you were having a strategy workshop, I'm not saying people can't contribute, but what I've observed is that you have people getting quite stressed when they're involved in things that maybe isn't, you know, their kind of best strength, if you like. It can drain your energy, and it means that people can be disengaged and they can burn out. So if you're positively using colleagues at the right point in any project or change journey, you're creating energy, you're building confidence with people, and then you're ultimately creating resilience, as everybody knows where they stand in that change process, and that they are at some point or other going to be able to add value. So you don't worry that it's not your sweet spot. And if you know you have a colleague that's brilliant at implementation or brilliant as a strategist. So when we worked together, Dawn, you know, one of the things that was absolutely fantastic was that me doing my thing and then me bouncing it off you and you making sense of it. It just made my day, you know, because it just worked. And I did, you know, and you don't feel misunderstood. Yeah, you don't feel misunderstood. Poor me.
I think that's brilliant, because you've certainly within your relationship, and I did want to ask the question about your relationships. I might do that in a second. But you know, that complementarity, it brings that, you know, you know.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. What you were saying about resilience as well just made me think, actually, it is so interrelated with other areas of work, isn't it? Because basically, we do want people to be at their very best in work, the best version of themselves. And they're only going to be that if they're going to be employed on things that brings out their strengths, that allows them to be in their groove. And they're only going to be in the groove if they're really able to draw upon their energy area, where they get energy for making an impact. But without the language to express it, how do you even say that? It can feel like a really uncomfortable conversation, because you're trying to pull things out of the air about what makes you happy, what do you want to do, what do you work on? Well, I don't know. But if you can talk about, well, where do you get energy and what does it feel like, you know, when you're in your groove, then you can. It really gives you some insight into how you can maybe have a really good quality conversation about whether somebody's just not quite in the right spot.
Yes.
And we've sort of tried to build that in to make it easier for GC as an organizer to use the language. I mean, those that will be familiar with GC Translate, for example, where we can actually quickly there's an AI tool that translates any content into GC index language, whether that's role profiles, aspirational project plan, strategy, whatever it is, but it sort of brings that language to the surface very quickly, and then they can use that data. So yeah, I love hearing this language bit.
But the more you use the tool, the more you get comfortable with the language, the more it spreads, the more people find it easier to, you know, to use it and to embrace the idea of it. Where are you thinking of going next with it, Emma? Have you got any ideas about what's coming next?
So the next big piece of what we're doing is actually looking at our organizational structure. So we have an organization looking at that. You know, are we structured in the right way to meet our 5-year growth plan? Because it is very ambitious. So that work's ongoing. And then the next thing I want to do, because what will happen is that I will end up with, you know, here you go, here's what your structure could look like to support your growth. But those are just boxes and titles, aren't they? Actually, what we then need to do is take the game changer and say, well, if we did that, are we going to be moving all our polishers into one team? Or are we, you know, inadvertently, because we haven't. So what we're going to do is map the output of that work that's being done and overlay it with this, because all of these teams, and otherwise there might be no point in moving everybody.
Yeah.
We could create a problem that, even though on paper you can say, wow, that looks like a brilliant org structure, but what's that really going to deliver?
That's a bit of a boom moment for me, because, you know, history's littered with people really high profile, very senior people who have had huge success in one organization, with a big ta-ra, has gone into another organization and absolutely bombed.
Yep.
And it just makes me think about the degree to which they were really surrounded in the right context, and that recognize their energy for making an impact, and them having the freedom to get on and do in that way, and being surrounded by the other areas to enable them to succeed.
I think the bit that I learned was people aren't at the same point as you in terms of when you might have some information, you've read something that you can kind of go off down a path. And if you do that too much, it will just really kind of, people will just not, they'll lose interest. So it's really difficult because it is about understanding when to play it and when not to. And that from an individual perspective can then become frustrating for yourself because you're having to rein it in, but you almost have to accept that. But that goes with any of the proclivities, because you can't always polish everything. You can't always get into, right, we've got to implement this. So it's about understanding when's the right time to do it. But the thing that I would recommend right now is to get your team profiled if you haven't already. So, who is the next highest in your team that actually could be the person you go to actually, as a sounding board.
How have you sort of, and as a GC partner, because of you're a GC partner and we're here to support you, support Emma, what's been your experience and what's it been like working with Emma or other, in your experience, the GC Index, and from a partner perspective?
It's been brilliant, really, to be honest. And I didn't have much time to take a breath after I became accredited, because the first person I spoke to about was Emma, and she went, "Boom, let's go, let's start using this." So I was off, and actually, but that's a really important point, because I felt, wow, it's just like I've just passed my driving test, and somebody's asked me to take them on a long trip somewhere, So I needed a little bit of support, and so there's a couple of ways, I guess, I would answer that. One of them is about as a small business owner and a GCologist, and what it means to me. And then there's another bit about as a HR professional and what value it can add as that. So I'm going to try and cover both of those if I can. But what I was quite overwhelmed with was the amount of support and resources that are there. So as a small business owner, somebody who just wanted to become accredited in something, I was surprised genuinely in an incredibly positive way about the resources that are available, the supports that are available. It's completely invaluable, because as a small business, it was just me at the time. We're growing now, but I didn't have anybody else to go to. So the team, you can use them as a sounding board, whether that's other GCologists. There's a really growing network of GCologists, and everybody's so happy to share what they're doing. So there's resources everywhere to help you deliver your work. If it's Nathan has made himself available to me on a couple of occasions. When I was first in a feedback session for a high polisher, I rang him and went, right, talk me through being you. What is it like? How do I get to know what polisher really means? And so the team really make themselves available, and there's just this big community of practice, which has been brilliant. Everybody sharing the learning. But as a HR professional, what really impacted me straight away, what I noticed straight away, was the tool and the language that makes sense to business owners. So and high level people, CEOs, the C-suite. So it can act as a hook to get HR input to some key commercial and operational issues. And for me, that was a really big thing. I mean, same as other HR professionals, I've been party to the most inane debates over the years about how do we get around the table, etc., etc. But you know what? This really can help, because it speaks a language that business leaders understand. So I found really quickly, first with Emma and then with others, that senior executives really just get it. They seem to get the language straight away. They understand it. It's a big hook. So yeah, it's all positives for me.